Thank you for joining us today. I'm Keith Tebow from FRC Media. Today I am pleased to be joined by the Chief of Police in the city of Fall River, Chief Paul Gauvin. Chief, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. I know we've been wanting to do this for a while.
We've been talking about it. Good afternoon. Thank you.
So, we actually last spoke about a year ago, and looking at my files, it was, I think, later in April. You were interim chief at the time, and then you were later appointed as the full-time chief. During that time, since you were interim chief till now, what have you learned about the job that you didn't know, maybe not even known about a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, to say what I learned, we could sit here and talk for hours. I've learned so many different lessons. Personally, on one side, I'm still a family man, and I have, 3 children. I have Jack, who's 17, Catherine, who's 15, and Claire, who's just 8. And so personally, it becomes into, a balance of work life and home life. And, they're each at a precious age, and I want to be there for them and their moments. So I love to work, and I work most Saturdays. I'm here, people see me all the time, but trying to find that balance and striking the right balance so that I'm home. I don't want to be an absent person because I'm so focused on work, and when I'm home, I want to be home. I want to be present in that moment and maybe help guide and coach my kids through their lives, and hopefully for good benefit. So personally, and having the support at home, those are the big things I've learned, I think, from a personal standpoint. Work, where do we begin? There's so many things, I think, with this position. It's so unique compared to, I think, any other rung on the ladder. One of the first things I could say here is that I've learned that you need to have good people around you. And fortunately, unfortunately, when I took over, if you remember, we had some deputies who had been here for a while, and they went out on their comp time, so I was stuck with no deputies. I also had some influx in professional standards unit. So over the course of time, we were able to fill one of the deputies' positions. It's been over almost a year. It was a little over a year because of the interim time. So I lost some institutional knowledge and some people who knew some of the inner workings that certainly would have benefited me. But no time to pout. I need to pivot and move on, and that's exactly what we've done. So, I was lucky to have good people around me. We've had Deputy Chief Baden Castro, who was promoted. He's doing a great job. I have Lieutenant John Martins, who's also helped tremendously with procurement and on things on the finance side. So everybody's kind of doing a little bit more than a one-person job, and from the command staff to the support staff here at the Fall River Police Department. Having good people around you is extremely important, and I've been extremely fortunate to say that I've had some very good people around me, and certainly I think for the community to know that there's certainly breadth and depth of leadership here in this building. So whenever my time comes to move on, we're going to have people right behind me who are ready to take over.
I want to start asking about crime in Fall River. Yearly the department, issues crime statistics. I know the department's still working on 2022's numbers going forward. How would you characterize over the past year the levels of crime in Fall River, and from what you know, how it compares to years past? Because as you know, people like to say things about what's happening in Fall River. Oh, they may perceive that there's more of one type of crime than that they may think, and how do you view
Sure,
that?
and it's we always talk about crime and the fear of crime. The fear of crime is certainly more important because that's what drives people's behaviors in our community. As far as crime levels, we're as far as I think the important things. There's stat numbers that we're not far off from where we were last year. Some things are better, some things are worse. My thing when we're looking at stats is looking at crime in Fall River compared to Fall River over periods of time. Where were we 2 years ago? Where were we 5 years ago? And there's certainly some areas that were up, and there's some areas that were down. So as long as it's going up and down, I think the biggest piece is to look at these individual silos, if you will, and say, well, why is this trending upward? Why is this trending downward? Is there something that's happened in the community? Is there something that we need to kind of really focus in on, or is it just a statistical anomaly?
Yeah, a lot is made about shots fired and gun violence in Fall River. How does that compare over the past few years?
Well, I can tell you this year we were slightly under last year's numbers.
So 22 to 21.
22 to 21. 22 we had less than 21, but not by much. Just statistically speaking, I don't think it was significant, but it was still less than. But as you mentioned, that there were some outlets who erroneously reporting that the numbers were way up. But keep in mind, this is a political year. There are already people I can see that are going to make crime an issue, and so they want to form some type of narrative prior to getting to election time. So I kind of just try to rely on the numbers that we have and go from there.
What about other forms of what's considered violent crime, assaults and battery and those type of things?
Some are up. I know this is the biggest. I think the biggest spike that we have was in regard to motor vehicle larcenies. For some reason, motor vehicle larcenies spiked. But when you start looking at our data and you start doing some data mining, you'll see that a lot of the robbery for motor vehicle larcenies. The motor vehicle larcenies were use related. So if a friend took your car, they didn't return it. There was a ton of those. Also, tied in with ATVs and dirt bikes. There were a good number of ATVs and dirt bikes that were stolen in the area. So the more of those we have, those numbers get tripped that way as well. But if you look at, going back to what I was saying previously, if you go back 10 years and you look at motor vehicle thefts, they're almost double what we have today. So, when we start looking at crime, when we start looking at, these 5 and 10 year blocks, it becomes pretty interesting. And I just read a study recently, and they were talking about, crime and how people think about crime, and it's always nostalgic that people, as they get older, tend to think of crime as always being less than when they grew up. So they always think, oh, I was so much safer when, they're in those old days. But then when you start talking about some of the things that happen, you start to spark a little different response, and so it's a natural phenomenon, and it really correlates with fear of crime, because if you look at demographics of people who experience the highest forms of fear of crime, it's an older generation. So it kind of seemingly plays right in together, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the ATV and dirt bike situation. We're getting into the warmer months and more instances of this. I believe it was about a week or so ago where your department announced a seizure of some of the vehicles. How's that process been working?
It's a long road.
Yeah.
I think we kind of take what we call an Edison approach, in a sense of you try 99 times. If you fail, you finally get the one tactic that works. Then eureka! You didn't fail 99 times. You discovered how not to do the tactic or how not to be successful there. But it is a little bit of a challenge. The law is not exactly in our favor. We do have a restrictive pursuit policy because these are dangerous things. Last year we had 2 police officers who were injured as a result of attempting to try to stop some people on dirt bikes and ATVs, and I expect those court cases to come up soon. So with the issues that we've dealt with and the public support for us, I'm hoping that we have a positive result in the courthouse for those arrests.
I want to get into now staffing. It's been an issue for quite some time here in Fall River, and we spoke about it a year ago. Let's get some numbers. What's the current complement here in Fall River of officers?
So really, we're talking about patrol. We're at like 166. That's counting our granting positions as well. So we're 183 down to 166 to 164 to 166. So we're still about 19 short. We've kept up with retirements. The biggest thing going forward is our retirement. People hitting max retirement age is drastically going to slow down in the next 3 years. I think we're going to lose maybe 4 people who are going to hit max retirement age, 32 years and 55 years of age. So going forward, we had a great contract with the city for the patrol, which really helped stop people leaving from the middle of that pile. So it seems like police officers are going to stay here because the money is the salary is competitive with other agencies. So lateral transfers really don't seem like a really good option at this point. So I think in the next coming year, the new list, it will be established, believe in June this year. So we'll have a new, fresh list, and I'm hoping that we're going to take a big chunk out of that vacancy list going forward.
I know we've talked about potential officers on that list not being as robust as it used to be. You know,
Sure.
we were talking before
Sure,
we
it's
started here
difficult.
how it's different now, where in the past you had a lot of potential officers who could come in, but no funding for it. Now you've got the funding and less bodies.
Sure.
You know, you've been asked this before. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's there's so many different reasons, but I mean, number one is, you know, we've been getting a lot of bad press over the last, you know, eight to you know, somewhere around the 8-year mark or so. I mean, certainly with the Floyd case, it's a job that a lot of people don't want anymore. So when we used to have these robust lists of, you know, 2,000, 3,000 people on a list, you know, we're down to, you know, 60, 70 people, you know, maybe a couple hundred. But it's really pales in comparison to, you know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, it's really jaw-dropping.
Is there an academy going on right now, or
We have
what's the
nine.
status?
We have 9 candidates right now in the academy. They'll come out in July, and then we have approximately maybe 6. We still have some testing to do, but we're looking for another 6 to go in the academy in May. So you know, it's going to be incremental, but it looks like this year we'll be able to finally make some ground, especially with, we do have some retirements coming up this year, but I don't think it's going to be as drastic as it has been in the last previous, you know, several years.
You mentioned the new Patrolmen's Association agreement with the city. There's some incentives there as well to help retain,
Correct.
as well as the recruitment part. I know it's still early, but have you at least heard some interest saying, "Hey, boy, this may be different for me. I may want to consider"?
Well, I think it's certainly made it more palatable to be a police officer here in Fall River, because it is a high cost to start, especially when you come here to work and to have a career and to make money. And the first thing we're asking from you is to spend, you know, anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 to pay for the academy and to pay for the equipment. So this program certainly makes it a lot easier to go through that process. And the other caveat there is that they sign a contract, and they're stating in that contract that they're going to stay here for 5 years. And if they leave prior to that, then they have to pay the money back.
Right. How does, you've been asked this, I believe, a number of times in terms of the weight of the lack of officers, that the full complement that you're looking for, how it's played on the rest of the rank and file and the patrolmen because of needing to fill time for people who are on vacation or get sick. How has that impacted police work in Fall River, or has it?
Well, it certainly impacts. I mean, to say that it doesn't impact the work here, I'd be lying to you. There's only one piece of pie here, and the work has to get done. So how we divide that piece between numbers of people, the community is still counting on us to do a job and do a quality job. So we've really worked really hard in increasing our numbers, especially in patrol. That's, I think, where we're hitting a very difficult spot, because a lot of our police officers were getting ordered to work extra. I mean, here are guys who are, you know, maybe getting 1 day off a week for, you know, several months in a row. And you know, so I worry about officers' well-being and burnout rate. And you know, if you tend to get tired and you start to get burnt out a little bit, you know, you tend to make more mistakes. So it has a trickle effect, a negative trickle effect. So it's certainly something that has caught my attention.
Has it impacted at all the other operations within the department that are outside of patrol? Have you needed to call some of those officers in to
Exactly.
fill? And how does that impact down the line, if you will, their work and the work all the way up, maybe even to chief in some ways, right?
It does, because everybody, you know, like I said previously, you know, we haven't filled some command positions up here where maybe in years past we would have filled those positions. But, you know, I've made it a conscientious effort to build the uniform division in particular. That's our uniform patrol. But it does, you know, to keep them functional, we've had to pull some bodies from every other unit. Now, the lucky thing with the numbers that we've had, we haven't had to shut down any particular unit and just to say, okay, we're not doing that service. But to say that it doesn't impact service, that would be illogical. But we've been able to maintain the staffing and uniform division by pulling, a body from this unit, a body from that unit, and kind of keeping them functional. But it places more work on other people, because I think, everybody who's here, you're not doing a piecemeal type of work. You're here for the community, and you're here for the people of the city, and everybody wants to do a good job. And every unit and every person in those units wants to be successful. So I think they take it upon themselves to do a little bit extra. But how much extra they can do, sometimes some of the services aren't quite as thorough as they could be.
In your view, has it impacted morale at all? I'm sure people,
I'm sure.
It's logical that it would, right?
Yeah, I'm sure, especially, it's especially tough, especially during contract negotiation, because, and I don't fault any bargaining group, but, they're going to expose, the deficiencies, and they're going to talk about morale. So I think that environment in and of itself, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm glad we're done with contracts.
Right.
It's been a busy year, and we've had so many different things going on. And at the same time, we've had 3 different bargaining units going. It's tough on morale sometimes. Yeah.
And in the meantime, we're in the midst of beginning construction season in Fall River in terms of road construction. You've got the city doing road work, water work, Liberty Utilities doing gas line work. There's need for those details. Again, another opportunity. Even though that's not part of an officer's shift, it's an additional commitment and overtime for those individuals. Are those being difficult to fill with Fall River police officers? And what happens when you don't have enough Fall River police officers?
So you're absolutely right. I mean, going back to the problems we have in patrol, where our personnel are working, sometimes only having one day off for a few months in a row, especially in the summertime where we have our vacations. It gets difficult to staff all the details, and the details are plentiful. We have probably more than we've ever had, and we've have less bodies than we've ever had. So it's kind of a perfect storm. So we struggled a little bit last year to fill all the details, but we also have a program where we allow officers from other towns to come in and work our details. Once our officers have gone through the details, it then gets put out to other communities for their officers to come here and work in. So if you're driving around, you'll see other police officers from other towns working.
Yeah. We've also got some events coming for the summer, right? And that's going to be an added tax, right, for the department. And again, would that be the same situation? Some officers from out of town may be able to fill?
It's a constant. I always try to make the analogy of, if you remember the puzzles that we used to have as kids with the little slide tiles, the little tile puzzles, and you'd probably end up breaking it just to put it back. But that's kind of how it is for us here, and we're trying to keep up with all these events. So you're just kind of moving the tiles, and you're trying to get the job done, because Fall River has a lot of traditions. We love a good procession for sure, but they have to be safe, and that's really falls on us. And we take pride in being able to keep people safe and to keep some of these traditions and to be involved in the community. But there does come a point where we have to say, hey, we just can't cover everything. I mean, we just don't have the manpower to do it. So we've had to make some different changes in regard to what we're staffing. But for the most part, we've been able to kind of cover the big events.
In the past, the city had an auxiliary police force, if you will, for lack of a better term. That has sort of gone away, and I know there's a call now for a volunteer unit.
Correct.
I guess what's going to be the difference between those two, and how does it look in terms of getting? Correct.
So the auxiliary unit, they were certainly a gem for us. Yeah. They certainly handled a ton of work, especially a lot of the processions, a lot of the community events that we weren't built and we couldn't stretch out to do. The auxiliaries chipped in, and they certainly saved us a lot of man hours that they've worked. So I really can't be appreciative enough of the job that they did. But the unfortunate side of post-reform is that
that's the state police reform bill that was passed a couple of years ago.
Correct. So within reform, the way the auxiliary unit was run, the uniforms, the tools, some of the tactics, they just didn't meet the criteria. So I think this was under Chief Cardoza. He sent the new post-reform law out to a labor attorney group, and we looked for their opinion as to where we would be for the challenge of post-reform in regard to how our auxiliary unit was being run and being used. And the opinion that we got is that there's no way that we could retain that unit in the way that it was being used. So part of it is stripping down uniforms, making sure that it's clear that they're civilian, that they're not in a front-facing position, they're not wearing batons, they're not wearing police clothing. So part of it is almost, some of it is, it's a little you're rebranding, if you will. It's kind of doing the same job, but maybe different tools and maybe less police-looking. But it's some of it's semantics, but it's certainly crippled our ability to run a lot of these processions without using our manpower.
And you're looking right now for some volunteers. Was the auxiliary a volunteer force, or were they paid?
Correct. It was a voluntary force, and it had been, I think, had been started back in the 50s. So we've lost some people, but we've asked them to, for those who did volunteer, who were around, we did ask them to come back and to join under this new rebranding, if you will. I know Captain Fatale, the Special Operations Division, she's spearheading this effort. And we've put it out on social media. I think as of this week, this is her second radio show that we've discussed earlier. That she's out in the media trying to dig up some people here and try to revive this unit.
Yeah. Is there a limit on how many you can have?
There is no limit. No limit. And we need as many as we can get. The more we have, the safer the events are, for sure.
Right in front of you, I see one of the body-worn cameras that the department will soon be using. Give us a status update.
Yeah, I'm super happy to tell you that we've been talking about body cameras for the last full. I know before I was here, we were talking body cameras, but officially today, Axon is here in the building, and we're training incrementally. We're training our police officers on the use and the nomenclature of the body cameras that we've purchased, that the city's purchased. So. Effective tomorrow, you'll start seeing police officers in the public wearing the body cams. It's part of the implementation phase, so we're not going to be fully functional probably until June, maybe July. But we're going to start, as we train, we're going to start using them, and hopefully it'll provide some opportunities to make a final tweak to policy or usage pieces that we have. But we're really looking forward to finally getting to that point of now finally having police officers with the camera on.
What have you learned from other communities that, again, a lot of it's going to be, I would think, contingent on actual experience when they're, turned on in situations and learning from that. But
Correct.
Have you learned anything from other communities that have sort of been, I guess, the basis of a policy here in terms of?
So yeah, there's a ton of literature out there, and there's other agencies that will help you create, and there's all kinds of police chief agencies that will help help you create a policy. The policy here, keep in mind, was contractual, so it came out of a bargain between management and the union. So we have a good policy. I'm happy with it. But talking to other chiefs in the areas that they actually have it, the police officers who have them, they love them. They've been far more beneficial for our police officers than they have been hurtful to anyone. So I'm looking forward to it, and I know, in speaking to the police officers here, they're really looking forward to putting them on and getting this program running. So I really feel the support. I think the officers know that this is going to be a real positive thing for us, and I think the community is going to like it as well.
The basis of the work that's done in this department is obviously to serve the community. And I know that the department for years has been very in tune with working with our city neighborhood associations.
Correct.
Is that relationship still strong, one? And two, how helpful have they been in terms of providing information in light of the fact of staff shortages and the like that may be beneficial to the department?
So they've been fantastic. We have an excellent relationship with our active neighborhood groups. you know, I know they were happy with the body cameras. I know Lieutenant Jason Pacheco went to several of the neighborhood meetings when we first had the pilot program, and he wore them. He was able to demonstrate and show them, you know, what the camera looked like, and you know, and explain all the facets of the program. So the response that we got from those neighborhood groups was really positive.
Mm. And there's always an officer at the neighborhood meetings, right? They provide updates in terms of what's
Correct.
happening in those neighborhoods. For
Correct.
people
This
to-
is, yeah, we're working with them. Even though there is a manpower shortage, we're still able to make those meetings. I mean, that's to me, that's, you know, the big part of this job is being able to listen to the citizens and what their issues are, and how do we help their quality of life in their neighborhood. What are their issues? And we do our best, especially having a police officer there. They get to know the police officer, and they're a little bit more willing to share what their issues are. It's certainly been a beneficial relationship over the course of years, and certainly this is going back many chiefs. So, you know, as far as I remember, when I got on was Frank McDonald, and I remember there were neighborhood groups back then. So
Right.
it's certainly part of the police community tradition here.
2023 is a year where the department needs to be accredited. And we hear a lot about accreditation in different organizations. I work at Bristol Community College. There's an accreditation process for higher education, as there are for schools and other institutions, public institutions. How does the accreditation work for police officers? And talk about how that's going to work this year.
So we're up, I believe, in November. Matter of fact, I think that's our 4th award there. And so they'll send down their assessors, their team.
And who does the accreditation? I'm sorry.
The credit, this is so, in November, this year we were reaccredited by the Massachusetts, we're state accredited.
Okay.
This November we're looking for reaccreditation from CALEA, which is the national accreditation from the Council on Accreditation for Law Enforcement. It's the gold standard for policing, for the policing business. And what they do ultimately is they come down, they go through all your policies, and they ensure that, you know, what your policies say that you actually do. And they don't just take your word for it. They go through your policies, and they want to see proofs that, you know, if you say you do X after, you know, any event, they want to see, well, where's that paperwork? They want to see, you know, how are you handling that? And do you have disciplinary issues? Are you disciplining people? They want to look at those things as well. They also come down for public. Usually they have a portal for public input. That I know that's already live. I've already gotten a few text messages from CALEA saying, "Hey, we've had some engagement with your community. You know, what can you say about this this response?" So it's very fruitful. It's a little bit like red teaming, where you get challenged on your entire department's operations. So I always look forward to it.
Mm. And how long is the accreditation for? I believe it's 4 years. Is it 4?
3 years, 4 years, yeah.
So,
19.
yeah. So yeah, look at the accreditation on the wall. We can find
That's
out.
it. It's right there.
Yeah.
Proof's in the pudding.
But how important is that? I mean, are there any repercussions if you're not accredited? What happens?
Well, yeah, I think part of accreditation is a big piece is the confidence from the community. That, you know, your department is actually following its policies, it's following its procedures, and there's proof and evidence of that. And I know some people, we've had some controversies,
Right.
and people say, well, you know, well, how do you still get reaccredited after having, you know, this controversy? And the answer is pretty simple. It's, you know, despite having controversies, that's, you know, accreditation doesn't mean you don't have any issues. All departments, every department in the country has issues. But it's how the agency reacts and responds to every issue. Can you have a police officer who violates the rules and regulations? You know, did they get disciplined? Did the you know, was something misjudged? Was something brushed under a rug? These are the issues that will get dealt with. But, you know, here I can tell you that we've had controversies, but the most important thing is that the agency has reacted the proper way, and police officers have been disciplined.
Yeah, and that's part of the process as well, right? As you
Correct.
said, right.
And even more so going forward, I think because of Massachusetts and post-reform, there's going to be ties now between discipline and now state approval oversight, if you will. So
Yeah.
it won't be just here and how, you know, what we say. It's going to be now an outside body who's going to say, well, was it appropriate discipline, or, you know, how did that work out?
Yeah. Chief Gauvin, I appreciate your time as always. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. And thank you for joining us. I'm Keith Tebow. Have a great day.